Welcome back, everyone. This is Untitled and Mekkah returning after a respectively lengthy hiatus, presenting to you Chapter 14 of my Fire Emblem 5 Paragon Mode 0% Gross playthrough.
It's good to be back.
So I hope that you're ready for the 28 minutes of this chapter that you're going to watch. This is the longest chapter in the game in terms of real time, not in terms of turn count, because there are 3 chapters that are longer. But the reason why this chapter is so long in terms of actual time is because it's a defense map. It's the first true defense map in the entire series. We had chapters 9 and 13 earlier, which were combination defense and escapes, but we finished those pretty quickly because we just had to escape really fast. This one, unfortunately, there's no way to end the chapter before the full 10 turns are up, so we're just going to spend as much time as possible doing grindy shit and making this chapter look easy, because I think most casual players kind of hold this chapter in some sort of high regard because they consider it to be an intimidating defense chapter, but if you know what you're doing, this chapter is actually really lame.
Yeah, I think most players who try to play a game quickly in some way, either LTCers or speedrunners, they kind of hate defense maps like this because you can beat them in a way, you can like trivialize them, but you can't make them finish quickly, so you just have to sit there for the whole turn count and wait for it to be over while doing a bunch of self-improvement. So, for example, in this chapter, if you know what to do, how to block all the armor knights that are trying to attack you, if you know how to dodge the ballista, then there's really nothing going on and you can just sit there until the turn counter hits 10. But for most casual players, it's obviously very intimidating to watch the city get assaulted from all sides.
So there's a few side objectives that we want to take advantage of. The one thing that low turn count players do like about defense maps is that because you can't shorten them, then you're free to grind as much as you want, and in some cases it gives you the opportunity to do things that you normally wouldn't be able to do if you actually had to adhere to a low turn count. So what we're going to be doing here is, first we're going to be using the arena as much as we can to get some extra money, because this map is one of the maps that has a vendor selling stamina drinks. Recall earlier that we had a vendor in Chapter 9 that sold stamina drinks, but we decided to avoid that because obviously it's too far out of the way. Here, we're going to take this opportunity to get as many stamina drinks as we need to trivialize the fatigue mechanic for the rest of the game. Additionally, we're using this opportunity to grind up Salem's staff rank. He starts at C rank staffs, and so he needs a full rank of staff usage plus promotion to reach A rank for warp. We can grind up Tina's experience because she needs to reach level 10 at some point for promotion. And we can finally grind up Asvel's win rank because, as you can see, the enemy density on this map is going to be massive.
We're also going to get a certain house, village, that's in the right-hand side of the map, and that has the Nosferatu tome. Dean is going to get it. He is the new Draco Knight that flew to the southern city wall. He's carrying Merida, not because Merida particularly needs to go there, but because Dean is so strong that he needs to nerf himself. I think Dean, if you had to compare him to another character in the series, it would probably be best to compare it to Har from FE10. He's a very strong Draco Knight that can be used from the get-go. He's got 3 pursuit critical, so with the Killer Lance, for example, he would have pretty much a guaranteed crit setup. He's got very high strength and defense. In fact, his defense is so good that he nerfs himself with Merida, so that these armor knights with javelins are guaranteed to attack him, because if their attack values roll too low, then they will instead go to the left, and we don't want that. Dean has got A lances and A swords, so that makes you useful both outdoors and indoors. Obviously, Flyer is greatest when they can just spread their wings and fly, and Draco Knights do get big penalties when going indoors, but nonetheless he's a very good fighter when he's indoors, so you can expect to see a lot of Dean.
Dean is the most important new recruit that we get in this chapter, although he is not the only one. There are 2 other characters that are new. One of them is a character whom we just recruited with Nana. He is a bard named Homer, pretty aptly named because Homer was a bard of Greek legend. Bards in this game are essentially glorified mages. Basically, Homer is just a mage who can use light magic, and when he promotes to Sage, so he loses that bard-like distinction. And you would think that because he promotes to Sage, he's a pretty good character. In a vacuum, he is, because in addition to having access to Sage, he also comes with the Paragon skill innate to him, and that's always good. But the problem is that he joins at this point in the game that's late enough where having an extra Sage doesn't really help us very much, and he would cost a Night Proof to promote, and we don't have any extra Night Proofs to spare. The final character that we received at the beginning of this chapter is a Draco Rider named Ada. She is, I believe, Dean's little sister, and because she is Dean's little sister, she's also worse than him in every single way. She's not promoted, so she has less movement, and her stats are really not that combat worthy, but having a third flyer is still helpful in some situations, so you're going to be seeing her a little bit.
Dagdar is trying to prove his manliness in a pretty outrageous way. He's currently holding Safi just to weigh himself down, and he's standing in the range of one of the ballista, and his purpose is actually to soak up ballista hits so he has damage that Tina can heal in order to grind Staffy XP. Now this is a pretty interesting process. The ballista is going to double him because of charge first of all, so there's a pretty good chance that he's going to get hit, and he doesn't really mind at all. What's kind of making this even more annoying is Tina will occasionally miss a staff. I think she has like a 1 in 3 chance to miss. But even if that does happen, Salem is around with a physics staff, and he also has vulneraries on him, so he'll be fine. And kind of the same thing goes for Dean. He's going to get hurt every turn, so there will be an opportunity for someone like Salem to heal him.
Yeah, actually, one of the biggest challenges of planning out this chapter was to figure out ways to reliably get heals every single turn, but to also account for the cases in which the heals will miss, and then we would have to resort to other ways to prevent units from dying. And so Dagdar really helps us here because he's really close by, so there are multiple units who can heal him. In fact, once Nana gets back into the center area, she'll also be able to contribute an extra heal just in case people miss, or I don't want to use a vulnerary. And there are also multiple units who can get damaged. Dean is the notable one in this case, but once we set up our final defensive formation, there will also be Shred and Glade, who will be vulnerable to taking damage at some points.
So we see the screen scroll to the left, 2 armors reinforcing, and then the screen scrolls to the right, and absolutely nothing happens. This is kind of weird. The reason for this is because the enemy limit has been reached. So for every map there is an enemy limit that's at 50, and at this point it's been reached and no more reinforcements can come. Normally there's supposed to be 4 armor knights and a mage coming from both sides of the map to add 10 enemies total to make the chapter more difficult, but since we haven't killed any enemies since the start of the map, the game just cannot load any more reinforcements, but it will still try. That's why you see this weird scrolling going on.
Now, if you were a player who was unaware of this mechanic, you would probably think, oh crap, there's like a million enemies coming at me, and I better start mowing them down one by one to prevent them from reaching the point that I have to defend. But your efforts would pretty much be pointless because every single turn for the first 6 turns, there are going to be up to 10 enemies that reappear. Unless you're killing more than 10 enemies per turn, they're going to replace themselves. Whereas if you do what I'm doing, you just have to stay in one place, and those enemies will just kind of never reappear. Now, there's a couple of little details that I do want to talk about in this chapter because they're not immediately obvious. One of them has to do with the enemy general sub-boss that just moved. The reason why he didn't move on turn 1 is not because he's not programmed to do so on turn 1, but it's in fact because every time he has a chance to move, he only has a coin flip chance of doing so, which is kind of annoying because it's hard to predict which way he'll go. Sometimes he'll end up going left, sometimes he'll end up going right, depending on whether or not he starts moving in turn 1. By the end of the map, we do want him to reach kind of the top of the map, so he does have to move like 4 or 5 times out of a total of 9 turns. That does introduce a little bit of RNG into this, but it's fairly small. The other thing that I want to talk about is, you might notice that within the city walls, there are 6 red houses that we haven't visited yet, and there's one red house that we did, that's the one that yielded Homer. These 6 red houses do not yield anything particular. If you visit at least 3 of them, however, you unlock the Gaiden chapter, which we are going to skip. It's the only Gaiden chapter displacement that we are going to skip because it doesn't yield any playable units. That might be design oversight, but we're going to take advantage of that. And the Gaiden chapter itself is a really annoying Fog of War chapter that's also an escape, so I'm glad that I don't have to do that crap.
So you can see the way we're trivializing this map is by putting disarmed mounted units in certain choke points. What the game wants you to do, as Donan said, is kill enemies, and preferably do so at the edge of the city, so that you're in ballista range and you're facing a bunch of enemies at once, and you have more healing to do. Basically, it makes the chapter more challenging if you do that, but we don't want it to be challenging, we want it to be easy. So what we're doing is, someone like Finn, who has got pretty high avoid and pretty high defense as well, is going to sit at that point And because he's disarmed, he's not going to kill any enemies, so there won't be any space for new enemies to come in and cause a chance of death. And because he's mounted, the enemies cannot capture him. So these armors have pretty high build, so if you were to use some kind of foot unit to block this instead, they would get captured. So that's why we're using like Finn, Glade, Fred, people like them. And we can just heal them if they get low, and we can hold this formation pretty much forever.
Speaking of holding this formation pretty much forever, Finn is almost invincible at this point, because the enemies don't have that accurate weaponry. They have javelins and hammers and stuff like that, which are not terribly accurate. But Finn currently is receiving plus 20 support from Leaf and Nana, and another plus 20 from both of them due to Charm. So he's getting a total of plus 40 avoid on top of his natural avoid. And then we also have leadership stars to take into account. Leaf has 2 leadership stars, Finn has 1, and Glade is contributing 1. So that's a total of 12 extra avoid. So 52 avoid plus whatever Finn starts out with makes it so that all the enemies that are attacking him only have 1% hit rate on him. And so even though he's being attacked 5 times per turn, the chances of him being hit enough to be killed in 1 turn of combat is almost 0.
So before we're completely surrounded by all these armor knights, there is one more thing that we have to do. Ada wants to visit the vendor at the left side of the map to buy all these stamina drinks, and Ada doesn't really like fighting through all these armor knights. We're actually spending 35,000 gold on these stamina drinks, and most players would not have that much stamina, not that much gold at this point, considering you start with like 0 starting gold, and you'd have to capture and sell a lot of stuff to get to this gold. So shoutouts to the power of planning by Don, because that's really impressive. I don't think you've really captured all that much through this playthrough. You're just using items that you've gotten through inventories and free events, right?
No, I didn't really capture that much, and most players, when they think of FE5, they think, well, I gotta capture everything possible, and sometimes they end up doing that, and it ends up being a huge pain in the butt. But you can go pretty far if you're really stingy about your resources, if you don't capture that much. And what I ended up doing, I would hazard to say that a good chunk of our money supply actually comes courtesy of Leinster units. Between the 5 generics that we had in the previous chapter and the Scrub Squad, Kane, Alva, Carrion, Robert, and Salfina, they've contributed a good amount to our funds by giving us weapons that we can sell at full price.
So I guess Leinster, it really is good for something, huh?
Yes. Well, not free silvers in this case, but in this game, you know, even iron weapons sell for a good chunk of money, so free irons.
So now the rest of the chapter, I guess we'll just chill and watch a bunch of armor knights miss Finn over and over. There's not much else to do.
The only thing interesting about the rest of the chapter, aside from what ends up happening near the very end, is the musical chairs that we end up playing with some of the characters in the center, because we're trying to figure out exactly how many times it's optimal to dance Tina and how many times it's optimal to dance Salem. The answer is 4 times Tina, 6 times Salem. But we have to move some units around because one ballista is going to run out of ballista ammo, and so Dagner's going to have to get attacked by the second one. But there is that one armor knight that's standing on that house who can potentially attack a space in the center area of the map that we have to kind of watch out for. So, oh no, one armor knight.
Yeah, that one red house, dude. It's totally put you in danger. I don't know why they built red houses at all, because surely they're not resistant to armor knights.
Oh my goodness, do you see Asvel not 1-round KO that armor knight?
Asvel had a lot of close calls this playthrough where, like, right here he's failed to 1-round his armor by like 1 HP. He's had his share of like 1% misses and then making up for it by getting adept. He's keeping things intense, he knows people are watching. It's making it exciting.
My original plan actually was for him to 1-round KO the armor knight, but I actually probably should have revised his plan because he's going to end up going to the other side and attacking the other armor knight, and of course he's not guaranteed to 1-round KO that guy either. But what I should have just done was at that point have Asvel stop attacking and then do whatever it is that he does at the end of the chapter, because he's going to get more than enough combat at the very end. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, he's grinding wind rank, right? So he's just probably going to end up like killing a bunch of armor knights or something. I don't know. I've totally not watched this video in advance, so I have no idea.
In the bottom left corner of this map, there are some enemies who are carrying some good stuff, such as physics staves. We're not going to be able to get them because that portion of the map is being guarded really well by an iron ballista and another enemy boss. But these enemies are going to try to heal their allies when they're low on HP, and they know that we're watching them because they have some performance anxiety, and one of them misses.
How annoying have staff misses been to you in this playthrough?
So in the intro video, I manufactured a staff miss reel because I don't keep the recordings when I miss, so I had to go back and like RNG abuse a miss and then make that staff miss happen. But I've had numerous attempts ruined by Safi missing because her staff accuracy isn't the best. And Chapter 24X in particular, I might complain about that when we get there, but because there are so many staff uses in that chapter, like literally every turn is like 5 to 6 staff uses, and some of the staff uses are with imperfect hit, it was actually almost impossible for me to find an RNG seed that allowed all of the staff hits to happen, and also allowed for one of the units that I needed to survive. So you'll see what's up with that when we get to Chapter 24X, but that was one chapter where I almost tore my hair out, because in theory it was easy, and in practice there wasn't the right RNG seed. It was dumb.
Does the RNG seed really matter? Because I don't know if we've discussed this in a previous recording or anything, but in this game you can advance the RNG in pretty easy ways. Like, you don't even have to burn arrows, right? You just open menus and stuff.
Right, but there are instances in which, so in that chapter there was no reason for me to open a menu. Because sometimes, like, if I open up a unit menu, I can spend a different number of frames in there, and then that will somehow change the RNG seed. And if I had that knowledge, then I can just kind of, like, randomly take a little bit longer in the unit menu. And then all of a sudden, the RNG seed is a little bit offset from where it was normally, and you could get a different outcome. But in Chapter 24X, I didn't have to use the unit menu at all to scroll between units. I mean, I probably could have, but I just didn't. And there was no point at which I needed to check a unit's stats. So if I had checked a unit's stats, it would have been pretty obvious, like, oh man, he's RNG abusing.
Yeah, so for the viewers, in GBA Fire Emblem you might have seen people do the little arrow jiggling to advance the RNG. You cannot do that in this game, but there's other ways to advance the RNG, which mostly involve just using menus. Apparently doing anything in those advances the RNG, but as Dandan said, it wouldn't really help him in that particular instance.
Now, speaking of RNG abuse, Mekkah, I remember you were telling me about a FE5 speedrun task that you had watched on Nico Video, or either that or it was on YouTube and it was posted over from Nico Video, but it was one that involved like Leaf gaining movement every level up, and then getting a movement star every time he moved and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's been a long time since I saw that. I was very glad that someone reposted it from Nico Video to YouTube, because Nico Video can be a bit of pain to log into since it's in Japanese only. But yeah, it's a Fire Emblem task. Basically, since you can level up movement in this game, it's possible to create a leaf that has like 50 movement and stuff. And this particular person also did the same for Laura and Leafus, and also made their combat really good by getting strength and speed and everything else every level up. So what ends up happening is, once he reaches Master, Leaf is already really broken, and Leafus is kind of okay, and he also manages to train up Laura on all these soldiers, getting movement stars every turn. And once they're in like Chapter 5, they're just racing through these prisons, killing enemies left and right, and rescuing each other, getting a movement star and then moving out. It's quite a sight to see. Words can't really do it justice, but it's really, really funny. It's obviously very heavily RNG abused, so if you prefer watching more realistic things, then it's not for you, but if you like the idea of Leaf and a bunch of thieves running around, killing absolutely everything. Dean also gets rigged to really high levels of RNG ridiculousness, by the way, so if you're a fan of Dean, definitely watch it.
Now, actually, Mekkah, after you told me about this a while ago, I looked it up, and I discovered that someone actually beat that task with another task. And in this task, he doesn't use Lipis. He just uses Leaf and Lara. And I'm not even sure if he trains up Lara, but he just has Leaf go through like the entirety of the game, walking around and occasionally getting warped by Staffy.
Well, I can see that working. I'm not like a task expert or something. I just kind of like watching it sometimes. Fire Emblem speedruns are not always the best. Like Speedrunning Fire Emblem is a very different thing from LTCing Fire Emblem, but the biggest problem with watching them is these kind of maps where just nothing is happening, you're just waiting for it to be over. That kind of makes it hard to watch. I imagine if you train less units, then it's generally faster to do so, but I always assumed that the guy who trained Lithis always had a very good reason to do it, like he just needed an extra unit often enough to where it saves enough time to make it worth training him, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, but then some guy discovered that you don't really need Lithis, and he saved that time. When he came to this chapter, actually the strategy that he used was he just kind of like grouped everybody near that little defense point, right? And then he had one of the enemy armor knights, I think, capture Ronin from a one-tile wide space, so that all the other armor knights piled up behind him, and they couldn't reach any of the other units.
That's weird. I guess he used mostly flyers then, because I don't see much room on that defense tile.
No, yeah, he used a lot of flyers, and he just managed to compress everybody over to the very top section of the map. By that point, he had abandoned a lot of units. His team was not very large, let's say.
Here, who's talking? Who did Fergus again?
Who's Fergus?
Oh man, it's hurting. It's hurting so much.
Well, fortunately, we have Dean. That's another really awesome mounted unit that you can latch onto, and unlike Fergus, he's actually good.
Shots fired. I mean, Fergus is around for longer, so obviously he's better. Although, I can admit that having a flyer, having wings is like good in its own right. Oh wow, wait, NPCs, reinforcements, yay.
Oh my goodness, we're saved, and they're flying towards us, so clearly they're meant to help us.
Yeah, they're gonna kill our priest, right?
Why is Dean being attacked?
I guess they're enemies. Shit.
Well, this is one of the bullshit things about this chapter, especially if you have not played this game before, and you're used to playing other Fire Emblem games where green units are friendly. In this game, that's not necessarily the case. In 90% of circumstances, they are friendly, but in this chapter and in one later chapter, the green units are enemies. You could think of them as just being another enemy faction. Half of these guys carry horse slayers, so if you were roaming about the outskirts of town and doing so with mounted units, and these guys spawned without warning and started ganging up on your mounted units with horse slayers, it's like the FE4 does it all over again. They're dead. Reset.
Yeah, also on the right, there was two dark mages appearing. There's supposed to be more, but we still reached the enemy limit, so there's only room for two. These guys are pretty dangerous for the same reason that the dark mages in old chapters were, because they do a ton of damage and they also poison you, but we will be better equipped to deal with them now because we have more means to increase our avoid and everything, but you still don't really want to be the guy who stands there and has to face them all.
Now, one thing that you will notice is that these dark mages are going to move every turn, and by the time this chapter ends, they're not even going to be close to attacking any of our units. So it also has to make you wonder, like, whether or not the developers really sort of imagine this sort of exploit being used in trivializing this chapter. Because again, as long as you keep all of your units in the center area of the map, they are never at risk of dying.
So the Thracian Draco Knights are going to come dangerously close to us this turn, but thankfully they do not get a turn 10 NPC phase. This is turn 9, and the chapter ends for them after turn 10 enemy phase. So if we can dodge them this turn, we're fine. And thankfully, last turn they moved suboptimally, and the reason for this is because they thought they had to fly around all of our units as opposed to trying to kill them and go through them. Because they thought that was the shortest route towards getting to the defense point, thanks to the way our formation is. But now they actually moved in a way that makes it impossible for them to kill us this turn, and we're very thankful for that.
So on turn 10, we are going to end the chapter with a final coup de grace. Asvel and Finn are going to do a switcheroo, and Asvel is going to take up Finn's choke point, whereas Finn's objective was just to hold that choke point for as long as possible without dying. Asvel's objective is a lot more murderous. He wants to kill as many armor knights as he can without dying, and his survivability is a little less than Finn's because obviously his HP and defense are lower, and he doesn't get as much avoid from support bonuses because Nano doesn't support him, but he still faces one hit from most of the enemy armor knights. It's just the ones with bows that have a little bit under a 10% chance of hitting him, so he kind of has to watch out for those. And then Salem used a final staff use to reach B rank staves, and then he got danced by Lara in order to use the Night Crew to promote and reach A rank staves. I just want to make a comment about Salem's promotion. His promoted Dark Mage costume looks like a purple KKK robe, which might be a tangential reason for why FE5 wasn't localized in the United States, because they would have had to explain that somehow.
I think they'll just change it if they ever localize this game. So Asvel, he's not doing this just because he's feeling particularly edgy or murderous right now. He's just trying to grind up his win rank. And this is made easier by a couple of things. One, you know when you're having a really long enemy phase where you're killing a bunch of enemies and your weapon ends up at 1 use at the start of the next round of combat and it breaks, and as a result you don't kill an enemy. Asvel doesn't really get hurt by that. He can ignore it. Like, even if your weapon's at 1 use, when you start fighting and you just double like normal, your round doesn't get like finished in the middle, so that's convenient. Also, in this game, weapons can break, but broken weapons will still exist in your inventory as broken weapons. So for example, if you were to use an Iron Lance and it breaks, it would suddenly have like no might and like really high weight, and you wouldn't double, and you might even die because you get doubled. Thankfully, a broken tome does exist, but it doesn't get equipped, and it also doesn't have might or weight or anything. You just use your next tome instead. So Asvel breaking a wind tome is fine. This is great because he uses up like 2 full wind tomes in the process of this enemy phase.
This enemy phase is the reason why we wanted the enemy general sub-boss to move towards the top of the map before turn 10, because now you can see that he is too far away to harass Asvel. Asvel's chance of death here is pretty small, but because we spent like 25 minutes getting to this point, of course if Asvel were to die, it would be a huge bummer. So we don't want him to be facing that enemy general boss because he has a Master Lance that one-hit KOs Asvel and attacks him twice, and his hit rate on him is somewhat dangerous. It's around 40 or so. So it's a good thing that he is over at the top of the map. Now, one thing that I do want to point out is he does have a movement star, so at the very end he's going to move and then activate his movement star, but he's still going to be out of range because he moved to the wrong place.
So over the course of this chapter, a couple of people got really tired. Lara danced 10 times, so she has 10 fatigue. Tina got to 13 fatigue, so she's barely out of fatigue range. Asvel got really tired. He got 17 fatigue just from this last enemy phase, and his 20 total. Finn is totally tired right now from all these enemy phases of dodge tanking, as 36, and Salem is at 41, the most fatigued unit in the entire run. So none of these units want to participate in the next chapter. They don't really need to anyway.
So at the very end of this chapter, apparently all of our defensive maneuvering is going to be for naught, because one of the enemy green Dragon Riders with a face, his name is Arion. He is the fiancé of the mayor of Tara, and he's just going to decide, fuck it, I'm going to fly over all of you guys and into the city and claim it for myself, thus rendering our feats useless. So that was chapter 14, completed in 10 turns. We'll see you next time.
See ya.